Mexican American, or a Chicano as I prefer to identify in the US context, having grown up in the Southwest in San Diego, California. It helps me really give understanding, I think, of my experience in a racialized society. And so I've got not a lot of text, a few pictures, because I'm very oriented to storytelling. And so I thought for today, I would share with you some stories about my experience, just to give you a sense of why I believe there's just so much work, important work left to do to ensure the next generation of not only Chicanos and Chicanas, but Latinx communities to really connect with kind of the full schooling experience. There's a lot of issues still. And so there's important work left to be done, and it's what brings me to my own work. So I would get in trouble, I think, if I didn't start with my own family. And I think my mom and dad, gosh, they themselves were born in Corpus Christi, Texas. And had it not been for them encouraging me, disciplining me, telling me what to do, keeping me on track, supporting me when at times wanted to stop. You know, being Chicano in school and being Chicano in higher education in predominantly white colleges and universities can get really isolating. And it was them that I often leaned on for support. They grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas. My dad started out as a farm worker, and then eventually became a welder, and now owns a small business, has for a long time in San Diego, California, in construction inspection. My mom attended, at the time she called it executive secretary school, and finished, and then had me. And decided then that was gonna be her career, was raising myself and my two brothers. I'm the oldest of three, and they are all still living in San Diego, California, and just so indebted to them for supporting me along the way. I really believe that had it not been for them and so many others, I wouldn't be with you today, is the honest truth. So thank you, Mom and Dad. It's real special. So my intentions for our time today over the noon hour is to share a bit about my own journey in higher education. I think highlight the importance of role models and community that supports the Latinx population. And then I want to lift up, I think, the role of educators and what they can play if they choose in the lives of Latinx youth and students, as they did for me. It just plays such a critical role in cultivating possibility, cultivating dreams for the future. So I'm going to just walk through just a few slides, and then I look forward to maybe having some conversation with you. So I want to just kind of set the context. So I was working on my doctoral degree in the early 2000s. So I can't believe it's almost been 18 years at this point. But I want to share this statistic with you because it jumped out at me then and really sparked my interest in this kind of research. So, you know, beginning with a group, if you will, a cohort of 100 students. And this is data from 1993, so it's quite dated, but I think it is important to give you a sense of issues we still need to work on. So beginning with a cohort of 100, only 55 will graduate from high school as compared to white students and Black students. Of that 100, only 22 will enroll in an institution of higher education compared with 38 white folks and 29 Black. What really struck me was this number: 7 out of the 100 will complete college. And there's tremendous research that's done about the barriers, right, facing Latinx community, Chicano students particularly, But I found myself very interested in that, but also very curious about the seven. What in fact led to their ability to navigate these post-secondary institutions, community college and four-year institutions alike. More personally, I was asking myself, what made me any different? You know, and I'll share with you some of where I came from. What made it so that I was now attending college? What worked for me? I didn't have the magic formula, right? And so I really turned all of these questions on myself to try to understand and share with kind of the next generation possibility and some things I've learned the hard way along the way, and also maybe the easy way. But I share this with you as a bit of a background for the work. You fast forward to 2006, and I'm motivated and disappointed at the same time to see that it looks like less than one Chicano of the 100 that started out in elementary school will earn a doctorate. 46 of those 100 will graduate from high school. 8 receive a bachelor's degree, and only 2 earn a graduate or professional degree. Again, so fast forward from 1993 to 2006. Clearly, a lot of work left to do. And certainly there's been progress, right? I'm not suggesting there hasn't been progress, there has been. And at the same time, I realized that there's also been not enough progress fast enough, right? And I think that reminds me, I think, of the importance of our work and what brings me to my own work every day. So I'd really liked, I really am drawn to researchers in this work, and particularly one, he's over at the University of California, Los Angeles, and I think this is, he and others, this is their life work. But when he talks about what we see happening in the middle of the paragraph, what we see happening for Chicanos and Chicanas, however, is that they drop or are pushed out of the educational pipeline in higher numbers than any other group. And I really resonate with this statement. While it's easy to blame the students, the responsibilities reside in the educational system itself. And I often hear this, and I agree with this, that educational leaders will often say it's not the student who's at risk, it's the system that's at risk. And there's some really serious issues to address. And so kind of with that background in mind, I'm going to share with you a bit about me, kind of what I wrote about in the context of my dissertation. I'm not going to read you the dissertation. I'm going to give you a verbal, some stories that came up for me throughout that I think are important. So there I am. I start with this because there I am as a baby. I was born in Anchorage, Alaska. And that's important because my mom and dad, my dad particularly during the Vietnam War time, finished high school and knew that he was going to be drafted. He knew that that was going to happen. And he had an uncle at the time who was already in the Army, was a few years older than him, who said to him, he said, Mira, you need to enlist because they're going to give you a test. And if you test well, you may not be on the front line, but you probably will be. He's like, they're sending us Black and brown community to the front line if you're drafted. And he tells me this story, and he's like, well, so he enlisted, he took the test, and it's interesting. He wanted to be a helicopter pilot, which would have put him right in the front line, so to speak. He ended up testing 1 point shy of qualifying to be a helicopter pilot. But what that placed him in was they actually placed him in Army intelligence, which is why they sent him to Alaska, which personally looking back, I'm relieved that that happened. But that's what sent my mom and him, who were high school sweethearts, And they decided to, you know, of course, when he was enlisting, he knew he was going to go somewhere. So we moved to Alaska, and there I am, not long after I was born. And that's important because where we ended up living after he got discharged from the Army after his service was they decided to live in San Diego, California. They knew that they weren't going to go back to Corpus Christi, Texas, not because they didn't love their family deeply, but my mom and dad both tell me a story about how they never quite felt like full human beings in the neighborhood that they grew up in, based on what they had experienced, the discrimination that they had experienced growing up. You know, not allowed to speak Spanish in school, they were put in detention, their tacos de frijoles were made fun of repeatedly, just on and on. And they decided, you know, we don't know what's outside of this where we grew up, but we want to explore something different. And that's what took them to San Diego, California, them not really knowing what the future would hold, right? And the picture where I'm a little more grown up and when I had hair, my full head of hair there, I was probably about 7 or 8 in that picture. Actually, no, I was 7th grade in that picture, but I want to tell you a story that came up in my dissertation that I think is important. So my neighborhood school where I grew up in a community called Southeast San Diego. And I didn't know it then, but it was primarily poor and working class, primarily communities of color, Guamanian, Filipino, Latinx, African-American, and a small number of white folks in the community. But for me, that was normal. I didn't know anything else growing up. And so my local school that I came later to learn that you get zoned for, I didn't know that part of it either, but got zoned for, was similarly, in terms of racial diversity, looked the same as the neighborhood. You know, it was right down the street from where I grew up. I got to the 4th grade. Always loved school, loved learning. It's no surprise to me looking back that everything that got poured into me has contributed to me working in a school, looking back. But my 4th grade teacher, I'll never forget her, Miss Rowe. I could tell you all the teachers I've had in school. And she said to my mom, she's like, well, Jake, I can only give Jake so much here. And, you know, there's a magnet school, but it's on the other side of the city. And there's busing. We really think that you should think about sending him there. So for 5th grade, you know, you do what your mom says, right? Like I never questioned it. You just do what she says. She's like, you're going to get up, you're going to take the bus at 6 a.m. and it's a 45-minute ride across the city. And I said, okay, great. You know, I could still hang out with my friends on the block where I grew up after school. But I took the bus that first day. And we drove and we drove and we drove. We even got on the highway. It's like driving from St. Petersburg to downtown Tampa. It's probably about that far. But imagine if you're in 5th grade, that seemed like 4 hours. Like it was a long time. The bus was full of other members of the Latinx community. And that was it. We showed and we drove and we drove. We got to the school. And the first thing I noticed was that the school didn't have a fence around it. And I was like, this is cool. They must really trust these kids, because the school where I was had a fence. Always had a police car out front. It wasn't uncommon for them to like tell us to stay in the classroom because it was unsafe. These are all things that were normal for me that I didn't realize other kids like me were not experiencing the way I was. So we get off the bus and all of a sudden there were a lot of people staring at me and staring at us getting off the bus. And I wondered, I was like my fresh shirt, like my first day of school shirt. Like, I was like, I took a bath, like I'm good. And I wondered, And it wasn't a look of like, oh my gosh, like it's so good. Like it felt like a heavy stare, like not a compliment, not bad. I wasn't sure what to make of it in my fifth grade mind, but I knew it didn't feel good. And then I noticed that it was mostly coming from white adults who were dropping off their children at the school. And it felt icky. But I said, my mom told me to come, so I'm going to give it a shot. The resources in the school were much better. You know, I noticed, these are things I noticed really, really quickly. There was a computer in the school back then. It was one computer. Just things like that that I noticed. But more importantly, I think it was the first time that I really felt that my skin color was not seen as something positive. And I remember that feeling vividly. I didn't understand it, but it didn't feel good. And I knew that I had to keep going back to this school, and it just felt heavy. So I share that with you as something really important because it was the first time I think I started to really feel my skin color and kind of what that meant in this, in my life. And I couldn't foresee what it would mean for me in my life overall going forward, but I knew it meant something. So I share this with you because it sets the stage for why I think this conversation is important. And that has to do with fast forward. So I finished my elementary school time, my junior high, my high school. Always liked school, but in junior high and high school, something happened where I really stopped believing in my own smarts. I got okay grades. I know okay is probably being nice to myself. I barely graduated high school. I got a 1.9 grade point average, and it's not often, it's actually often that I sometimes wonder if the school district's gonna call me all these years later and say, hey, you didn't get a 2.0. Like, we need to pull that high school diploma back. But I share that with you because one of the things I noticed in my senior year of high school was that there were other classmates of mine getting permission slips to go talk to a counselor, like a guidance counselor, and I never got one. So and they would come back after about 20 minutes or so with, at the time, pre-World Wide Web, they would come back with college catalogs and like nice glossy brochures. And so I was kind of anxiously waiting for my permission slip, and it never came. And so I decided, I internalized from that, well, my grades really aren't that good, so that's why I'm not getting a permission slip. But probably more deeply than that, I said, well, I guess I'm not smart. And so I guess college is clearly only for smart people. So therefore, I'm never going to be in a college. And so when I share with you, I'm with you, sometimes pinching myself, because from where I began, doing what I'm doing now was never something that would have crossed my mind. So I graduated high school, and the one thing I've always loved to do is fish. I love saltwater fishing. I grew up on a coast, and so I decided, well, I'm going to do that for a job. And I got a job as a commercial fisherman. I was a deckhand. I was 18 years old, and it was the first time I left home. So for me, that was my kind of first time away from home, and I got on a boat. And I don't know if you all probably resonate with this, but I worked that job for 6 months. It was the absolute hardest job I'd ever done in my life. And, you know, I'd get cussed at, yelled at, put down. You worked 20, 22 hours a day. And I was out there and I decided, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but it's not this. So we got back to port. We dropped off our albacore tuna, and I quit that job. I got on a Greyhound bus, and it was in Westport, Washington on the West Coast. And it was a 3-day bus ride back to San Diego. And I got home, and lesson number one is I'm standing there in front of my parents, and they're like, well, we're so glad you're back and you're safe. But if you're going to live under this roof, you're going to do two things. You're going to work, which was going to be easy for me given what I just experienced. I really got a humbling experience on this fishing boat. I was ready to work 3 jobs. The second part made me freeze. And they said, you're going to go to school. And I remember saying to them in that moment, but I barely graduated high school. Like, I have no idea how to go to college. Like, there's no way. Thankfully, they said, well, you got to figure it out. You got to go to school if you're going to stay here. And I remember being real mad about it, like real mad, like 18-year-old mad. Like, I'm an adult, but I didn't have no money. Like, it's not like I could go anywhere, but I was still mad. And yet I was like, well, where can I go? And my dad thankfully said, well, there's a community college down the street. It was about a 10-minute drive. Go and sign up for 1 class. So I rolled my eyes, as my 18-year-old self would do. And I took the bus. I went to the admissions office and I said, I can't leave here if I'm not in a class. It doesn't matter if I'm weaving a basket, writing a poem, building a bike. It's just, I can't go home. I'm not going to have a place to live. And it was 2 weeks into the semester, and the admissions person there said to me, well, you realize you're late. And I go, I told him the same story I just told you. I just got off the fishing boat. This is what happened to me. I was on the high seas. I quit. I need to get a class. Here I am. I'm so sorry I'm late. Thankfully, she took pity on me and she said, well, there is 1 class. It's down this hallway. It's in this room. The professor's name is Miss Christensen, Deb Christensen. She teaches Algebra 1. You got to get her to sign this ad slip. And if she does, you're in. And I said, that's it? Like, I'm going to be in college? Like, that's all I got to do? Okay. So I go down the hallway. I get into the class. I knock on the door. So rule number 1, I interrupted the professor mid-lecture. I didn't know. She said to go ask. So I went to ask. Professor Christensen said, can I help you? I said, can I add your class? She said, you're late. I said, yeah, I know. Before I could launch into my story, she said, sit in the back, and after class, I'll talk with you. I said, absolutely. So I sit in the class, and I'm kind of there listening. And the end of class comes. She sits down. She's like, so why are you so late? I told her the same story again. I was on a fishing boat. I just got back. I quit. My parents said I need to take a class. And she said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to sign that form, but you're going to do 2 things. And I'm like, 2 things again? Like, come on. Like, she's like, you're going to complete all the work that you've missed. And if you get a B or less, I'm going to fail you. And I was like, hey, well, can you sign this form? Because I need a place to live. Like, you got to sign this form. So she signed it. I'll never forget it. I stuck my chest out proudly. I went back to that admissions office and I said, hey, am I in college? She's like, let me input it in. She input it in, and there I was. That was my first class. That's important because I spent the next 2 years. I became the master of withdrawing, the master of incompletes, the master of enrolling in 5 classes, dropping 3. For 2 years I was there, and I didn't know I could transfer to a university. I found out because 2 years into it, I was really faking it. I mean, it's the honest truth. I was faking it. My parents were happy that I was going. And I wasn't really a cut up, I was living in San Diego. I was 19. I was having a good old time. I had a car, I had 2 jobs, and I was going to school. Like, Publicly, people thought, man, this guy's really got it going on. What they didn't know was that I was failing and getting D's in 3 out of the 5 classes. That was my little secret. 2 years into it, I stumbled on a flyer on the ground in front of the transfer center at my community college. And what did it say? Transfer to a university. I picked that flyer up. I went into that office and I said, is this true? And the administrator at the desk thankfully said, is what true? And I said, can I transfer to a big university? And she said, well, there's 2 things you got to do. You got to meet the qualifications that they're asking of you, and you got to figure out how to pay for it. I'm like, I'm a hard worker. I got 2 jobs. I could figure out how to pay for this. The requirements, on the other hand. So I spent the next 2 years cleaning up the first 2 years. So 4 years now, but I had a purpose. I kid you not. I felt like the sky had opened and I had a purpose. And that was really my beginning. The professors there and the staff there became kind of my second home. They encouraged me. They held me accountable. They reminded me that I could do it. And that I belonged at a university. If I put in the work and I figured out how to pay for it, which I didn't realize was so complicated till after the fact, that I could do it. And I really needed that because like I shared, I had decided that college was only for smart people. And that wasn't me. So that was my start. I transferred to University of California, Santa Barbara, like Maria shared. I majored in English literature. And I noticed one thing that's motivated my work to this day. I got there and there weren't that many gente. There weren't that many people that looked like me. And there were fellow white students telling me that I was only there because of affirmative action and that I didn't really earn my place there. And I remember being kind of fired up about that. Like, again, it wasn't a compliment. And I was like, wait, that ain't true, because I know where I've been. Like, I came from rock bottom, 1.9, and now I'm here. Something isn't right. So I decided then that I would dedicate myself to try to have to attempt to have a career in a university to make it so that maybe the next generation has it a little easier than I did. I decided to do that. I needed to pursue graduate school. It took me out to the state of Vermont. So I went from the Southwest to the Northeast. Went to the University of Vermont. I was a chocolate chip and a bowl of vanilla ice cream. I couldn't find tacos to save my life. I missed it. I was cooking it on my microwave. Like, never had I been asked more in the 7 years that I was there. What are you? Who are you? Wait, what's that language that you speak? Like, on and on. And I also learned there were good people in many different places. And that got me through. I got my career started there. There were people who mentored me, opened doors for me, hired me. And I was fortunate to receive the Bill and Melinda Gates Millennium Scholarship. That funded my schooling the whole way, graduate school, including the doctorate. And that's why I'm here. It was tremendous. And I'm remain thankful for that. That has made it so that I could apply for certain positions in a university or college that otherwise I wouldn't even be looked at. I wouldn't even be considered. And that's real and for me and in my experience. And so I'm remain deeply grateful. So kind of as I start to bring this to a close, I just want to have conversation with y'all. I spent 7 years there at the University of Vermont. My next step as a family, you'll see pictures of my family there. My partner is from Honduras, and we met, of all places, at the University of Vermont. And go figure, we landed there the same year. I had decided I wasn't dating anybody, and she wasn't going to date anyone either. and we happened to take a class together, and I saw her and I was like, "Woo, okay, how am I gonna meet you without being seen as slick or smarmy or weird?" Like, so it took us 2 years. We were friends, but our family together is just real special to me. And we made our way out from the state of Vermont to the state of Washington. So we lived in Seattle, Washington for about 8 years. And I had another role there at Seattle University. That was a private institution, Jesuit Catholic school, first faith-based school that I'd ever worked at. 8 years. And then we decided, you know what, we want to be really closer to family. And so my partner has family here in the southern part of Florida, as I shared my family's in the West Coast. So I was job searching in both places. And then this opportunity came up to serve as the Dean of Students here at USF St. Petersburg. And it's now, I'm in the midst of year 7. I can't believe that. So 2014, we moved here. I consider myself new to Florida. But it's been wonderful for us. And, we continue the conversation about race, about racism, about the Latinx community. There's just a ton of work to do. And it's kind of what fires me up, what brings me to my work every day. And I just hope to make a difference and hope to help someone behind me. That's just really important to me, that it's not just about my own achievement, because to me, from where I came, that comes and goes. To me, what matters is the place different for the good for the next person, because there's leaders coming after us that need to be supported. So that leads into this, and then we can have conversations. So this reminds me that this work is about the next generation. For me, it really is about making a difference for the next generation, not necessarily about me. Children, I love children, love the next generation. And I feel like I'm not yet comfortable, because I'm not yet able to say that our Latinx children can bring their full self to the school system without penalty. At least I don't believe that. And so, because I can't say that I believe that, I feel like there's just a lot of work left to do. So I will kind of stop there, and maybe we can have some conversation or questions, or thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz. I mean, virtual embrace and virtual applause. You were so engaging. I was like, I want to hear more and more and more. I mean, I'm tuning in for the book.
Yes. I need to write this down.
So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You had a teacher in the elementary school, who spotted a great potential for you, who felt that if you had stayed on that side of the track, mm-hmm. You were not going to receive the most beneficial, education and encouragement. However, something happened at the magnet school, because you were transferred there. Your former teachers entrusted you to that other side of the road, and you travel all this length. However, you were no longer engaged. So can you tell me maybe 2 or 3 things that may have happened in your tenure at this magnet school that you still can see is happening in education today?
That's a great question. Thank you, Maria. I think to start with, and I'll share with you an important part of the story that I left out that's important to your question. I never quite felt like I fully belonged there. I'll give another example. So I would often notice that many of my classmates who seemed to be local to the area at my magnet school seemed to have a new pair of tennis shoes like every month. And I used to get like one pair because that's what we could afford. It was one pair, and if it had, I used to have holes in the toe, the end of the toe, and so my mom would tape it, and because it's what we could afford. But again, in my frame of reference, that wasn't abnormal. It was just, you got some school clothes and you wore the heck out of them, and that was it. And I remember feeling like, not only from a race perspective, from an economic status perspective, this like, man, other people live like this? Man, that's cool, but it ain't me. But I remember feeling like that also came with some negative judgment, right? That, you know, I had to wear some of the same clothes over and over again. At minimum, I felt self-conscious about it. But to the belonging point, my teachers were wonderful at the magnet school. I remembered feeling really challenged, and I did well, and I won the spelling bee, believe it or not. I love words. But when it came time, at that time it was called junior high, so 7th and 8th grade. When it came time to decide where to go to junior high, I begged my mom and dad to let me go back to my neighborhood school. And it was because I didn't want to feel so uncomfortable anymore. And they let me, because I think they could see that while I was excelling academically, I felt really, really out of place. And I think today's school system, I think that still happens. And
it does.
Yeah, and where it didn't feel like my culture mattered. What I shared, what I brought to the table mattered. And but individually, there were teachers that cared. So I'm not suggesting it's everybody, but I do think as a system, it still communicates a pretty monolithic story that only certain cultures matter. So,
Could you share some of the feedbacks of some of your students right now? So you're Dean of Students at USF St. Pete.
yeah.
And maybe some of these students come to you for guidance. And what are the feedbacks that they have shared with you, and how we can do better?
Yeah. So I hear, even as of 2 weeks ago, some of the same things that I was experiencing even in elementary school. For example, I've had students, particularly students of color, share with me that they feel invisible, that they want and need to see faculty and staff of color that are working directly with them. And there's such a small number. I mean, if you just break out the statistics about just trying to get the educational credential in the first place to situate yourself so you can even apply for some of these roles, there's a problem. But they share that there's so few, they see so few people that represent their culture of upbringing or culture of origin, that then it's hard for them to even to feel safe or some level of understanding anywhere on the campus. Or that, I think, to put it more poignantly, one student shared with me, they feel like they have to check their culture of origin at the door.
Yeah.
And turn it on for their academics. And then once they leave, they go to where they seek out comfort. And so the feedback is still similar. While there have been improvements, I still think we haven't tackled the belonging question. We haven't tackled how do we help all students matter. We know, and particularly for Latinx students, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work left to do, so.
Yes, and this is the reason why, to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we can talk about all the achievements, how far we've come, but we always need to pause about and reflect about what is that we can do better? Where does the change need to happen? And that's why we invited you today, because not only you had your personal experience, but you are in a position where you hear feedback from students, from professors, from administrators, and that's what we like. We like to be agents of change, and we believe it can happen in any corner, wherever we work. So we have a comment from Nereida Rivera, one of our winners from the trivia from last week. Nereida is saying, as a New Yorker, I was discriminated against in all Catholic school by a Caucasian teacher. Also in college, the head of social department told me that I will never become a social worker. I am so proud to say that I was able to obtain my master's degree in social work. Nereida, you are a double winner. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, Dr. Diaz, it's incredible. And my short experience dealing with the educational system in the United States as an immigrant, I have done it secondhand through my children. It's the constant insinuations of what my children will be good at. So for my daughter, is the constant insinuation that she should join beauty pageants. And, and so it is a culture that I believe we can change with education and more seminars. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Diaz, for sharing your lunchtime with us and enlightening us and empowering us. Thank you so much. Again, thank you also for all attendees. We're going to move to a very short video and then some words for, again, becoming agents of change.
Thank you.
Enrique Gomez and Evelyn Hernandez have 7 children, with an 8th on the way. All of them studied in the United States, but the older ones have had problems in school.
Tuvieron muchos problemas en el kinder, en el primer año, y aún ahorita tienen problemas con desarrollo de lectura y de matemáticas.
The Gomez family is not alone here. This is a very common problem with Hispanic families.
De cada 10 hispanos que entran a la primaria, solamente uno va a salir con una educación superior.
Recent studies by the National Center for Education Statistics reveal a wide education gap between Hispanic and white children. This gap has remained constant for the past 20 years.
Cuando un niño latino entra al kinder, tiene más o menos entre 3 y 6 meses de rezago comparado con un niño blanco. Y esas diferencias se van acentuando y se va expandiendo la brecha.
One of the causes of this achievement gap is the lack of access for Hispanics to quality preschools.
El 70% de los niños blancos asiste a la educación preescolar. Menos de la mitad de los niños latinos están matriculados en la educación preescolar.
Evelyn highlights the positive effects her youngest daughter experienced from attending one of these programs.
La niña se puede expresar como si yo estuviera hablando con una persona de 7, 8 años y ella tiene solamente 5 años.
The teachers also believe that the education gap between Latinos and whites starts at home. Parents are their children's first teachers, but the rigors of modern life prevent many Latino families from encouraging their children to read.
No existe una cultura en el hogar para leerle a los niños desde muy temprana edad.
Studies show that a child's vocabulary can be improved by reading to them at a young age. And even if parents cannot read, they are advised to sit beside them with a book and tell them a story.
Nosotros de padres, nosotros tenemos que estar más influenciados en lo académico con ellos y enfocarnos más en nuestros niños porque son nuestro futuro.
The research shows that getting involved with our children's education as early as possible is crucial if we want them to achieve professional success down the road. From Los Angeles, California, Julia Sáenz, Univision.
Again, the importance of engaging our children and families from a very early age. So today with us, we are going to invite Alicia Gomez, and she works with early education. And we are excited to have Alicia inviting us to share important information with our families and with our communities when it comes to early education. Alicia?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's so exciting. It's so good to hear from the experiences that Dr. Jacob had. As a director here at our center, Learning Empowered at St. Paul's, we serve a lot of Hispanic families. One of the things that we do establish from the beginning is that relationship with parents, especially all parents, but in particular Hispanic parents, to make them feel welcome and that they can work with their children at home as well, that it doesn't take too much. As we saw earlier, just reading to their children, just finding out what's happening at school, being informed. In our VPK program, we prepare children for kindergarten. One of the things that we are doing is having meetings throughout the year, short meetings throughout the year, to inform parents of how the VPK program will help them, will help their children be prepared in school. What are the skills that they need to learn? When they need to learn them and how they need to learn them. We stress the attendance, which is very, very important. Sometimes we have years where attendance is very low. So we stress that attendance is one of the most important things that they can do for their children as well. Bring their children to school every day so they have that consistency and that continuity of learning. But the main thing that I've seen throughout the years is that the parents need to feel safe as well. They need to know what's happening, and by us staff making them feel welcome and making them, teach them and educate them on what is important for their children has helped tremendously. So that is one of our missions, is to help the parents understand what the children need to learn and how they can help them at home. I think when we set those foundations in preschool, they will be better prepared, the parents and the children, when they go to kindergarten. So as we say, school doesn't start in kindergarten anymore. It starts in preschool, as early as babies. So we see the difference when we have the babies, when we start the children as babies all throughout VPK. Sometimes when they start in VPK, it's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder to prepare them because they don't have those skills from the beginning. So we love it when the children come to us as babies, and we have that progression because we also work with the families closely to educate them as well.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you so much. And again, everyone, thank you for joining us today. So I would like to mention that you're going to have a follow-up email where we're going to list opportunities to share with the community for these early education centers. Also, if you have the feeling that you have great ideas, you have this initiative, these programs, projects in mind that can improve the way Pinellas County and the Tampa Bay area offers early education, join committees, join boards of directors, send your petitions, because the more the better, the more the merrier. We need your input. It's really easy to be a passive activist, but we really need action. We really need to be agents of change. Please join us next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're going to have recipes. We're going to talk about culinary arts in Latin America and all the influential recipes and those things that we eat in restaurants or when we're at friends and we really enjoy. Guess what? We're going to share a lot of secrets with you. So we hope that you enjoyed today. We hope that you participate in the photography contest. We hope that you join us next week for the culinary arts, enjoying learning about the rich culture of the Latin American and Hispanic culture through food. So again, thank you so much for being with us today.